It's time for another garden update. So let's get started. The popcorn is tasseled out and it's forming ears. And the beans are climbing back here. The glass gem corn is past the popcorn in height. And I noticed one of them has a tassel starting to come out on it. So I need to make up my mind what to do about that soon. In front here we got beans that are starting to finally climb. These are the later beans. And our last type of corn over here is just starting to grow well, and I've got beans coming up there. And behind the corn, I'm growing a squash, and these are supposed to be more resistant to the squash vine borers. So we'll see how that goes. Early on, one of them, I inspected them every few days, and one of them I had to pick some eggs off of, so I don't know if we have any more than those. I've stopped inspecting now, and we'll see how it goes, but I've been spraying the base of the plants with some pyrethrin every week or so. And the hops plant is growing pretty well, and I'm going to really have to try to get something rigged up for a trellis for it this week if I can find the time. This tomato here in the grow bag, got a couple ripening ones there, and I picked a ripe one 2 days ago. The marigolds are growing pretty well. There's that petunia in the basket. The eggplants are really starting to take off now. Let me show you real quick. This one has a couple of eggplants on it. Then the peppers, they're starting to take off a little bit, but they're lagging behind where they should be. There's an albino bullnose, Santa Fe Grande. It's got lots of peppers on it. There's an emerald giant, it's got some peppers. That one's a violet sparkle, it's got some peppers. And there's some of them that are just starting to grow a little bit. Jalapenos. Then I have basil between the peppers. I'm going to have to cut that way back. It's just growing too fast. Then over here in the side of the garden we have some ornamental peppers in pots. I did have the ground cherries here, but they grew so much I had to move them because they were taking up too much space. There's our Oreo feeders. I'm going to be posting a video tomorrow on those in case anybody's interested. The petunias don't look so hot. It's early in the morning and they never look as good in the morning. And we had a little hail last night, and some of them are a little damaged from that. And folks in Eureka, Kansas got hit by a tornado last night. That's the second time in 2 years, so our thoughts and prayers are with you. The zinnias are looking pretty good. I think I'll do a video on those soon. And the straw bales are looking really good. As I mentioned before, I stuck some sweet potato slips down at the bottom there. And these little bitty red robin tomato plants have produced quite a few tomatoes considering how small they are. And I've got some that are ready to pick now. In this straw bale we have a couple of peppers. This one's a violet sparkle and it's got quite a few peppers on it. This one over here is an Oda. It's got some pepper started on it. And this is an ornamental pepper. It's Phileas Blue, and it's got some peppers started on it. Now for the tomatoes. It's really hot here, and today's high is supposed to be 102. Tomorrow's high is supposed to be 103. I think I'll put it up on the screen what that translates to in Celsius, but I don't know that right off the top of my head. But we've got quite a few tomatoes on the bottom halves of the cages, and as you can see, the top halves are pretty bare, and that's because they just don't set on well when it gets really hot, and we've been hot for a while. There's the petunia in the hollow log, and the small one next to it with a sedum. The onions are doing pretty well over here. Some of them are getting pretty good size. You walk down here. They're not huge or anything, but they're gaining some size. And we're starting to get a few cucumbers. These are Market More 76, by the way. They're my new favorite cucumber. They did really well for us last year, and it looks like they're going to do really well for us this year. I forgot to mention the pole beans. Those are Kentucky Blue. Those are my favorite pole beans. And as you can tell by the blooms on them, they're very productive, and if you've never grown them, I'd recommend them. They're a pretty good bean. And I just put some string up for those cucumbers, and they're starting to grow. I didn't mention the onions over there, but they're doing pretty well, and so is that hollyhock is in bloom. The passion flower, I'm kind of training it to spread out across that trellis. Down in this straw bale, we have 2 tomato plants called Red Pride. They've got quite a few tomatoes on them. Can't see most of them for the foliage, but they're in there. Haven't got any ripe ones yet, but lots of tomatoes, and it's actually still setting on a few, which is kind of surprising. The tomatillo, I was wondering if I'd ever get one, but it looks like we've got some setting on now. They're hard to see for all the foliage, but there's one right there. There's probably several dozen mixed in with all those leaves. I noticed the honeybees were on them the other day, so that's probably why they're starting to show up now. And the later tomatoes I stuck over here, that Mountain Magic, it only had time to set a few before it got hot because I was so late. The chocolate pear over here, let me just get over here and show you some. It's got quite a few tomatoes on it, and since it's a smaller tomato, it's still setting on a few towards the top of the cage. So we'll get some of those once the larger tomatoes peter out. And this is my cleft grafted plant, by the way. It was grafted onto a Ava purple ball, and I let one sucker from it grow, and that's an Ava purple ball there. I don't know if it'll produce in this heat, but we'll find out eventually. Then I have a bunch of different peppers over here. Some of them are just now starting to get going. And we have some more zinnias. Let me get on the other side here. And in this straw bale we have 2 eggplants and an ornamental pepper. And I'm going to be harvesting some of these today. I've already harvested Off of these 2 eggplants, I've harvested 10, and I'm going to be harvesting more today. So it's doing very well. Still got small ones up the top. And this is an ornamental pepper I got in the middle between them. It's called Black Pearl, and you can see how it got its name. They do kind of look like little black pearls. The potatoes in the grow bag. There's a grow bag over there. And here's the end of one of the vines over here, and the center part is still growing. And these are basically just offshoots from the parts that fell over, and I'm not sure how long they're going to keep growing. I'm waiting for them to kind of start to die back, but they're not doing it. But the first grow bag is Yukon Gold, and the second one is Kennebec. I had to add more soil to the Kennebec because some of the potatoes were starting to show, and that's not good. Then, as you could probably see from the opening shot, the Velvet Queen sunflowers are getting very tall. I've grown this type before and they've never gotten this tall. Those 2 are probably getting close to 8 feet tall now. Before, when I grew them, they topped out about a little over 6. Then I've got another type of sunflower over there. It's supposed to have really big heads on it. We will find out about that. Another string trellis back there with cucumbers. We're going to have plenty of cucumbers. And we do go through a lot of cucumbers, so, and we give away some. I've got some canna flowers coming up behind the grow bags. They've been kind of shaded and smothered by potatoes and sweet potatoes. They're starting to show up now. And the grow bags with the sweet potatoes, they've kind of turned into a giant ball of vegetation, and I'm not sure, but I think when I harvest them, it wouldn't surprise me if I don't get some yellow jerseys in the purples and the purples in the yellow jerseys, because they're just going in all directions. And the purple, Okinawan purple, is actually starting to root in this Kennebec grow bag, so I had to cut that back. And what I've done is I've taken some of the parts I trimmed off, and you can see they're starting to root. It only takes about 4 or 5 days in this kind of weather, and there's enough roots to stick them in the ground. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got some more over here. And I'll just walk over and show you the ones that I took slips and stuck them over here under the straw bales, and they're just now starting to take off. And I'm guessing by the end of the summer this will all be filled in with sweet potato vines. And there's the little banana tree. It's just now starting to feel its oats, and it's going to be taken off at a pretty good rate, I think, in the next month. You can see the difference in the leaf size. Each one gets progressively bigger. Got some Swiss chard being eaten by grasshoppers over here. Some more there. The cotton is starting to grow a little bit, but still isn't doing all that well. It's shaded a little bit by the sunflowers. Finally got some dill peeking its head up above everything else. Sage is coming back after being cut back a little bit. Horseradish, you can't ever tell that I chopped and dropped it. And the rhubarb still doing well. We've got some blackberries back here against the shed. This is just one plant started. Oh, that's really good. Nice and sweet. And one thing I forgot to mention that I thought was pretty interesting. Back in the winter, I tried to sprout some pink banana tree seeds, and they didn't sprout, and I kind of gave up on them. Then I saw some cheap ones. I bought them. I stuck them in just about every pot I had out here. That was probably a month or more ago. And this morning I noticed we have little banana trees popping up. There's 4 of them in this pot, and I looked around and they're coming up everywhere I planted them. So what they needed was a certain temperature and some rain. We've had rain recently, and I think that's what stimulated them to sprout. But it's kind of cool to see, because I'd just about given up on them ever sprouting. You can see one here and one there. And here's the ground cherries. They're just growing like crazy. Never grown them before, so I'm kind of learning as I go, but they seem to be easy to grow. I don't know what they would have done if I would have stuck them out in the garden, but they're really growing well in these pots. Here's the other one. And then that one I had in that pot just for insurance. I think I can safely say I probably don't need it anymore. Oh, there's the petunia on the tomato plant. I tried to do some grafts on this one and they just didn't take. I think it's because of the heat. I'm going to cut this back because you can't even hardly see the petunia anymore. It's growing so fast, and it's in just a little bitty pot. And there's like my little experimental onion in a pot. The bee balm is in full bloom, and we were sitting out last night and we watched a hummingbird spend about 5 minutes on these bee balm flowers. We got a couple of different colors, but mostly pink. But that hummingbird, he really seemed to love the bee balm. And he started over on the zinnias, moved to the bee balm. But when it comes to flowers for hummingbirds, my favorite one, and the one I've had best luck with attracting hummingbirds, is the Rose of Sharon. And this one is just starting to bloom. It's got tons of buds on it. I pruned it real good earlier this year, and well, if you get close you can see all the little flower buds that will be opening soon. So this thing will be covered with blooms in a few weeks, and that'll be just in time for some of the hummingbirds when they start migrating south. And the morning glories are starting to take off. I've got 3 different types growing here. These ones down here, these are the ones I protected with the plastic forks. It's a Japanese variety. Don't remember the name, so I had to put it up on the screen if I remember to do that. So, and here's another variety down here that's a variegated type, and I use these mainly for a ground cover. You'll have to wait to see what the flowers look like unless I can find a good picture of them to stick up on the screen. But they grow really well. The foliage is pretty attractive even without the flowers, and the flowers are really pretty, so it works pretty well for a ground cover. And then I have some volunteer climbing morning glories that just came up from seed. Don't know what color they'll be. Probably purple. That's what we had last year. So I'm letting those grow on this small trellis here. So this, by the end of the summer, will just be a mass of vegetation and flowers. It'll be kind of interesting to see how that works out. And I don't want the volunteers to climb with the other types, so I'll have to keep an eye on those, which isn't exactly easy sometimes. The petunias in the tub look terrible after a hard rain and hail. I'm really going to have to do a video just of the petunias soon, so you can see what they look like in the afternoon when they're at their prettiest. They look pretty awful. We recently had a storm shelter put in, and the milkweed was right in the way of progress. So what I did was I tried to transplant some, and this one was like a kind of an offshoot from one of the big plants. So I tried to save as much of the root as I could. They have a tap root, and so far it looks like it's going to make it. And this was a bigger plant. I just cut it off and transplanted it, and it's still green. Don't know if it's going to make it or not. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. Then I have one more over here, and the leaves have fallen off of it, but it still looks green. And I'm kind of holding out hope that this will start growing. So we'll see about that. Then over here in the corner I have a yacon stuck over here. Here's a look at the Naranjia. It's kind of perking up after a couple of rains, and I think I'm going to be fertilizing that a few times, see if that helps. Didn't fertilize the one last year at all, and it grew like crazy. Back here with the Naranjia we have another cobbled together trellis, and it has cucumbers growing on it. And I might have showed you this in the last update, but this is a pepper that I have grafted onto a tomato plant, and it's actually got a bloom on it. So I'm going to keep an eye on this and see if it'll make it, but it's looking okay so far. Then I have another one with a tomato with a couple of tomato grafts on it, hoping to get a few late tomatoes on it. I'm going to trim this back a little soon because this is the rootstock growing here. And I don't look at most of the garden. I didn't get into some things, but those will have to wait for another day. If you're just now finding this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Otherwise, like, comment, and share. We'll see you next time.